Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to have you here for the last breakout session of the day. This is to build or to buy a cost-benefit analysis of purchasing an online vendor product versus developing your own. And this presentation is all about developing online prevention education programs. So our goal with this session is to increase the confidence and comfort of violence prevention practitioners who have found themselves wondering, with all of the vendor products available on the market, but in an increasingly monopolistic market with limited customization, have you been wondering, could I do this better myself? Is this even feasible to build something homegrown? But maybe you're daunted with the idea of where to start and what is needed. This session is for you. So we are presenting this as a group today. We'll all go through and introduce ourselves in a moment. We are most of the violence prevention team at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin. And over the last 15 years or so, our team has been on a journey using both vendor and home developed online education programs. So we're here to share our experience leveraging both. And we actually do currently use both vendor and homegrown products. So we'll talk through factors to consider when weighing the pros and cons of buying versus DIYing it. And then we're mostly going to focus on a case study demonstration of how we built one online program from scratch. So just a little bit about us. I'm the first person you see on the screen there in the red sweater. I'm Sam Bowen. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Assistant Director of Violence Prevention at UW-Madison. So I work in campus sexual violence now. I've also worked a little bit in HIV, public health management, and I oversee our team. So I try to make sure that the fine people on my team have the things that they need to do their job, and I'm not as directly involved in the online program management, but you'll get to hear from each of our perspectives. And Alex, if you could go next.
Yeah, definitely. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Nelson. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. You can see me there in the denim jacket in the middle. And I'm a violence prevention program manager. I've been in the role here at UW-Madison since 2016. But my background is actually in peer education. I came into violence prevention as a peer educator and wanted to just make my professional life dedicated to violence prevention and higher education. So I've supervised peer education teams, built in-person workshop curricula, but nowadays my primary role is administering all of our online programs for undergraduate students. We use the You Got This program from Catharsis Productions, and we also have our homegrown GetWise programs, which is a suite of 4 programs that are topic-based. We'll talk a lot more about them throughout this session, but that's kind of my role. Super happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nola Pastor, she, her pronouns. And Alex and I were the original writers of most of the GetWise content, those like homegrown online programs that we're going to be talking about today. I'm a lot less connected to the online programs now, so I was a little rusty in preparing for this presentation, but still really care about them from that like original involvement and being part of the revision process for the first few years that we use them.
Awesome. So that's a little bit about us. Just a few notes about our presentation. So we're hoping to save questions for the end, mostly just to keep us on track. We are an easily distractible group. So please continue to add Q&As in the Q&A function on Whova. Jot notes down as you need it. And then we should have plenty of time at the end to get through questions. I also want to give you a heads up. We do have a few interactive features and materials to showcase, including Slido, which is a live polling technology, and some GIFs. We've heard mixed reviews on whether all of those features are screen readable. So if the Slidos present a barrier, we'd love to just have you input your feedback in the chat function. We just want to hear your thoughts. And then all of the images on the slides should have alt text loaded in, but we'll also do our best to describe what's on the screen when it's relevant to the content. And then finally, we're happy to make this information available beyond the conference this week. This is our 3rd time presenting this content at a conference, and we have and will gladly share the slides. I just dropped the link in the chat. Please feel free to share with colleagues. This is not secret or private information. We've also done and are happy to do one-on-one consultations with anyone who is in the contemplation stage of this to buy or to build question. So please don't be shy to follow up. The whole point of putting this presentation together is we want you to have the tools to communicate with your leadership what cost, skill, and investment is necessary to build an online program from scratch. So please use it and share. Okay, so just a little bit about what we're hoping for you to get out of today's sessions. So from our perspective, there are three main domains to consider when deciding whether a homegrown program is feasible for a campus. The first is campus infrastructure and institutional buy-in. The second is technical skills. And the third is content expertise. And each of us are going to go over those a little bit. We have a guess that you probably feel most comfortable in that third domain, the content expertise. That's why you're working as a prevention practitioner in this field. But there's a lot of additional things to consider to whether that content expertise can translate into skills to manage an online program. What accessibility considerations have you made? Are you familiar with trauma-informed learning principles? What ability do you have to use online interactivity? Can you manage an iterative quality improvement plan? So beyond just getting the content on paper, there's a lot more to consider. So some of our learning objectives, we want to introduce you to the basic skill set and software needed to design a homegrown education program. We'll help you conduct a SWOT analysis, a little bit of a cost-benefit analysis of purchasing versus making a campus-specific program in-house. And then we want you to be able to identify and or articulate 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages to consider when deciding whether to build yourself. Oops. Whoa. Oh no. Can you all still see? Oh, no.
Yeah.
I can't see you. Oh, you all just went away. Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. That's fine. We'll keep going. Okay, so as long as you all can still see me, that is fine. Oh my gosh. Sorry, y'all. Okay, we're just gonna move you over here. Okay, so just a little bit about our experience. We feel particularly uniquely positioned to give you all a little bit of insight because we have experience working with both vendors, contractors, and developing our own programs in-house. We currently work with one vendor, Catharsis Productions. We're huge fans of that company, and we're also about to start working with Vector as well. We also have experience working with a contractor on campus to help us build out interactive elements of a homegrown program. And then we have experience doing it entirely ourselves. Like the people you see on the screen, mostly Alex and Nola, don't have computer science backgrounds and have entirely built this thing themselves. So truly from all 3 perspectives. I do want to give you a little bit of context about our campus makeup, just to give you a sense of the resources that we have to work with and the infrastructure that informs our decision making. So the University of Wisconsin-Madison is a pretty well-established institution. It was founded in 1848. We are a land-grant state school. We are the flagship campus of a sole state system. We're a Research One Big Ten campus. We have a fairly large, medium-sized campus, 939 acres built on colonized Ho-Chunk land. Our enrollment recently surpassed 50,000 students, over half of which are Wisconsin residents. A sizable amount are international students, which is a huge consideration for how we make content relevant. And then just if you're curious, our prevention staff and our survivor support staff is housed within the Student Health Center. So our services and programming are entirely funded through the health service fee, which helps to think about how we're financially sheltered from some larger financial challenges that the university faces. So that's to say, like we're pretty well resourced. So just keep that in mind. So for most of this session, we are going to talk you through a case study using UW-Madison's homegrown online prevention program, the Get Wise series. This is our second dose of prevention education. So all of our first-year students partake in the prevention compliance programs roughly the month prior to when they start school. And then for our first-year undergraduate students, we also require that they follow up that participation with a second dose of prevention education. We give them a choice of what topic they want to engage with. So we have ActWise, our bystander intervention module. Dating-wise is all about healthy relationships and dating violence. Listen-wise is our survivor support skills module. And then sex-wise is all about healthy sexuality, consent, and sexual assault prevention. We've also recently started offering this to our older students. So we're now encouraging our sophomores, juniors, and seniors to take it as well as a bit of an annual refresher. We have so far about like 15%. I'm like looking at Alex, like, yeah, about 15% uptake on that. And GetWise is our baby. So GetWise first existed as a in-person peer facilitated dialogue and activity-based workshop. When the pandemic hit in 2020, this team took some time to switch the modality to online, and we haven't gone back since. And that being said, the program has evolved over time, both for quality and feedback concerns, new research and new data, but also most recently to bend to political whims of the administration to match what's going on at the federal and state level, which we'll talk a little bit about as a risk and opportunity. Okay, so here's where the Slido comes in. So if you'd like to participate using the Slido, you can either open your camera app on a phone to scan the QR code. It's possibly going to ask you for a passcode, which is M6FJN4. And then once you're joined, our question for you is, do you or does your campus currently use a vendor or homegrown online program, or a mix of both? Awesome. So we've got a lot of folks using a mix of both. So that's good to know. Our next question is, are you considering building your own program? So either I'm scared, I don't know where to start, or I'm in the contemplation stage, or yes, I'm ready, or I have already started doing this. Okay, awesome. Great. Okay, so that's a really great starting point. Great. Okay, so going back, I just want to give you some price points, our best estimate financially of what your options entail. So again, going back to that vendor option, contractor option, and homegrown, you're going to see that they go from large, medium to small in terms of direct cost. And I'll explain what I mean by that when we reveal it. So from our experience, different quotes that our campus have gotten, it costs between $15,000 to $32,000 in annual costs per program to buy something from a vendor. So just in terms of that direct cost of signing a contract with a vendor to essentially do most of the work for you. The contractor option, so on our campus, we're very lucky that we have an academic technology department that has some academic learning designers who also are skilled in building their own programs, from the actual platform itself to the video work to the transcription work. We have worked with them in the past to build a program from the ground up. That was a pretty medium cost, between like $12,000 to $55,000 in upfront costs, plus building on some maintenance fees year by year into the contract to upkeep the program from year to year. And then the homegrown version, so doing it ourselves literally with the people you see on the screen, that currently is costing us $1,500 a year in an annual license to use a course authoring software, but the kicker is the staff labor to maintain it. So while it's a low cost in direct fees, we have essentially dedicated half to a whole FTE in order to run these programs. Alex is sort of our lead online program manager, and essentially their entire position is dedicated to running these online programs. And we have a lot at this point. We're running, let's see, 6 or 7 online programs in some way, and not all of those fall on Alex, but Alex is sort of our in-house tech person. So just to give you an idea of the scale. The other thing we want to let you know is that there are a lot of different there's so much software available to do this nowadays. Like really the market has expanded on this. And so on the screen, we have just a few examples of course authoring software that's available on the market for purchase. Most, if not all of them, also have like trial runs so that you can test out the technology before you make a decision to purchase. So Articulate 360, iSpring, Composer, Lectora, H5P, Easy Generator, Adobe Captivate, Elucidate, and Hurix Digital. We happen to use Articulate 360, which is a very popular one. It's pretty user friendly. If you have experience like building MySpace pages in the 90s, 2000s, like you can probably figure out how to use Articulate 360. Okay, so that's the technology. I want to walk you through how we see some of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in building your own program. And this is sort of like the decision-making matrix that we use when we come to decide what are we buying and what are we building. These are how we interpret them. I would encourage you that if you are in the contemplation stage, to revisit this SWOT analysis with your team or with your main stakeholders. So the strengths, as we see it, very obviously, the ability to customize your content is unmatched when you do it yourself. You can get really specific about your campus resources. You can change the hours that are available from semester to semester. You can feature videos and images. You can incorporate campus data as it comes in, make the program as socioculturally relevant to your campus identity and branding. And there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate student voice and experience. As you saw, I would say it's cost effective just in terms of direct costs. Of course, the overall cost, thinking about FTE and labor, is pretty substantial, but it also allows you to align your content with your team's values and your campus's approach and frameworks and models to the work. It also allows you to be very adjustable and nimble from semester to semester. Literally, like we have been in the position, especially in our political climate, to make changes like up until the morning of deployment. So it is nimble in that way. Weaknesses, obviously, this is a significant amount of staff time and investment. As I mentioned, Alex's whole role is essentially online program management. The other weakness to consider is that depending on the skill of your team building the program, the interactivity is really limited by skill sets. So you can make the program as interactive as the ceiling of your skills allows. Alex has invested a lot of time and training into learning how to make more engaging online content that engages the user. But if you don't know what you're doing, it can kind of look like the Microsoft version of Paint versus PowerPoint. So it really is limited in that way. There's a long development phase because you're doing it yourself. And the other thing to consider, especially if you are using a vendor that offers you analysis and pre and post tests, is that there's no built-in data analysis package. So that has been a huge challenge for our team to keep up with the analysis needs of the programs that we're producing. Opportunities. So doing it yourself creates the opportunity to make as many custom programs as you can create. As I mentioned, we have a lot. It allows you to expand your portfolio to what topics you're speaking to. There's a huge opportunity, I would say, for staff growth and development. We just know so much more about online learning principles and accessibility considerations than we ever would have known in the past. It creates a lot of opportunity for campus partnerships and then data collection, because you can sort of collect the data you want to be collecting versus what a vendor limits you to collecting. And then the threats, continual maintenance. Once you open this door, you will be constantly thinking, how do I improve this? How do I make this better? What feedback am I receiving? And so it is sort of opening Pandora's box of what's possible. You have to consider staff turnover and onboarding. So we've been really lucky that our staff has been pretty stable since we've started doing online programming. And so this team sort of knows how to do it. But I often wonder of how would we orient new staff to this really particular niche skill set. Production delays inevitably come up in anything you're building. Technology changes. What happens if your campus changes their online learning management system? What happens if the software you've been using forces upgrades that you're not familiar with or have to learn? And then finally, critical feedback. It's in bold because for us, it's been the threat that has been ongoing over the past year. So critical feedback, both from students, once your students know that you control this content, that you can make changes, that you can directly incorporate feedback, people will let you know what they think. And so what decisions are you making of How often do we review the content? Who needs to review the content? Who needs to be involved? And then what management does executive leadership have over your content as well? What access to legal affairs or public affairs needs to be involved in the feedback process? So again, this is sort of our take of doing this for several years of what the main strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are, but would definitely encourage your team to do this as well. The other final thing I'll leave you with is there's just a variety of questions to consider before you embark on this. And I'm going to put a whole bunch of text on the screen that's hopefully not to overwhelm you, but to help you possibly articulate to leadership the amount of consideration you need to take in order to go down this homegrown venture. It's not as simple as we're just going to build a program in a year. So some technology considerations. Do you know what your learning management system is? Do you know how to use it? How comfortable are you with it? Do you have the ability to produce and edit videos, record sound? Do you have any IT support, maybe online learning development staff who could help you out with this journey? Or do they have the ability to contract with you? Do you have access to an accessibility specialist to audit your programs? And are you familiar with or can you learn WCAG compliance? Feasibility, what's your budget? What's your upfront budget? Does it account for maintenance cost? Does your leadership know you want to do this? And do they support it? Do they understand the time and cost investment? Do 3 levels of leadership up understand the investment and the cost investment? What's your timeline? How long do you have to do this? And does your timeline account for any focus groups or testing or changes you want to make? How often will you make revisions? And what is in scope and out of scope for what sorts of changes you'll make? And then who gets final approval of the content? And then your team input. Take a look at your current existing team. Do you have team members who are skilled and experienced in writing curricula? When we started this venture, none of us were early career professionals, so we had some experience putting together programs that we could translate into the online modality. Who is the lead for the project, and will they be the same person who actually builds and administers the program? What's their skill set and background like? Does your team have expertise in program evaluation and statistical analysis? And can you dedicate either 0.5 or 1 FTE of your current team, or do you have the budget to hire additional staff? So these are just some questions to consider. And so even just to look at these, how many of these can you answer, or who has the answer to these questions, can give you a good idea of if you're ready. Okay, so that's a little bit about the infrastructure required. Alex is going to lead us through some of the things to think about when actually building your course.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about building your course. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of how our courses are designed, or kind of the
Your sound is really quiet. I don't know if that's just me though.
Oh, is anyone else having trouble with my sound?
Well, now we can hear you, but you were really quiet.
Okay, I'm just gonna lean forward like I am now and talk directly into my computer. Let me know if that ever gets worse. Thank you so much for interrupting me, though. I appreciate it. All right. So before we get into the nuts and bolts of how our courses were designed, I just want to do a little check-in with y'all. So we're gonna do another Slido here. Sam, if you could advance to the next slide. So, how confident are you in your ability to develop an online course? Very confident, somewhat confident, only a little confident, or not at all confident? I'll give y'all a couple minutes here, or seconds, I should say. All right. Cool. So I didn't see anyone who was not at all confident, so that's awesome. But it seems like we're kind of in the middle there, between a little and somewhat. So that's great. Hopefully, we can the next couple slides that we're going to show can help generate ideas and confidence for building out a course of your own, should you choose to go a homegrown route. So first, we kind of want to tell you a little bit about the software that we use and the technology that we have at our disposal at UW-Madison. So at UW-Madison, we use Canvas as our learning management system. So your campus might use Canvas or a different LMS. Canvas in particular has a few features that we rely on quite a bit for our online programs. So among them, assignments, we use them quite a bit, and they can be sorted in a modules menu, which lays out a clear pathway for students for how to complete the course. There are also quiz and survey features. So we use anonymous surveys for our pre and post program evaluation before and after our educational module. You can also make custom pages. So we use that to make a home page and a page for instructions that tell people, what exactly is expected of them for how to complete our GetWise courses. We also use Canvas to host SCORM packages. So a SCORM package is a little zip file that contains all of the learning materials, and it can also pass along a complete or incomplete grade to our Canvas gradebook. And that's how we use, or that's what we use to track completion and send our reminder emails and things like that. Our institution in particular has a few really cool Canvas enhancements that are really essential to what we do. So we have an auto enrollment feature and an enrollment hold integration, which allows the placement and lifting of enrollment holds for anyone who does not complete the program by the time it is due. So it is required per use of an enrollment hold. So these integrations are amazing. They're automatic, and it's only happens through a robust partnership that's been built between Canvas and our enrollment management team and our registrar's office. Yep, thank you. Amazing. All right. So as mentioned, we use an Articulate 360 product called Rise. And this creates our online courses that are embedded in Canvas via that SCORM package. So Rise is pretty cool. Our academic technology folks call it kind of the easy bake oven of course authoring. It's very intuitive, very user-friendly. It's a browser-based course authoring system. And it uses these customizable blocks that you can kind of stack on top of each other in line. So students can scroll through the material. So you can have like a variety of text blocks or photo or video blocks and a lot of interactive blocks to learn the material. And I'll actually spend a bit of time showing and demoing some of these interactive blocks in a bit, actually, and the text and photo ones as well. Rise also allows the user to customize the course theme to match your institution's branding, if that's something that you're interested in. It can also embed third-party pages and different kinds of widgets. And it can also embed other Articulate products like Storyline, which is basically like if you had a PowerPoint, like Microsoft PowerPoint, but it had the power of like Adobe Photoshop. Like it's extremely customizable and is used to build all kinds of things, but among them interactive, educational kind of course modules. So we use those blocks a lot. Articulate Rise also has its own stock photo gallery feature, so you don't have to purchase photos elsewhere or scour the internet for a photo that works here and do it over and over and over again for all the places in the program that you want to use photos. It's embedded directly into Rise and is, again, very user-friendly. Like I mentioned, these Rise courses export as SCORM packages, so I can put that directly in Canvas, and then Canvas can use that as an assignment, where if a student completes that, you'll get a complete grade, and if you don't, you'll get an incomplete grade. So I can use it to track completion, send reminder emails, and things like that. Just a little overview of how we built this program. So as we said previously, we originally adapted the GetWise online series from our in-person peer-led workshops to an online environment. And so when we did that, we really had to go back to basics and really refresh ourselves on adult learning principles, specifically learning as well, adult online learning principles, since it's kind of different. So the building blocks of all of our modules are based on the following. First, you want to identify your learning objectives. So what exactly do you want them to learn or take away from the experience? Then assessment. How do you know that they learned what you want them to learn? And then finally, how can you leverage different learning modalities and technologies to help the student best learn the objectives? What are your learning strategies that you're going to employ by designing this? And knowing your software is really, really key here and what all you have the opportunity to do and what you're capable of and what your software is capable of. The course design for each module was developed based on this kind of document, which I'll show in the next slide, that we were super fortunate to have our peer educators help us in adapting these. So we made this document of these 5 principles, which I'll name in a second, and invited them to help us adapt the workshops into an online kind of experience. So in doing that, there are 5 things that we wanted to be featured in every single module across the 4 to 5 modules that are in each of our 4 programs. So it's kind of a course flow document. So we've got text, context, and purpose. So what exactly do you want them to absorb? This is related to the learning objectives, right? So do you want them to know definitions? Do you want them to know statistics? Different kinds of like context about violence or survivor support or things like that. We also want them to have some kind of interaction or activity that helps them really dig into the learning material. So what exactly do you want them to do in the experience? Then perspectives. What do you want them to consider or reconsider? Remember, this was based off of a peer-led dialogue-based workshop where the peer voice and perspective was just foundational to what we were doing. So we really wanted to highlight the student voice and the student experience in this program to the best of our ability, knowing that students couldn't necessarily talk directly to each other when doing these programs. The next is reflection. So as again, another part of dialogue series and another part of just educational programs in general is making it real and relevant to them. So we wanted them to be able to have opportunities to reflect on their own lives and experiences, things they've heard from peers, seen in the media, heard from family, friends, etc., to make it as real as possible and directly applicable. So we have a lot of reflection opportunities there. And then finally, resources. So where do you want to direct them? Either resources like confidential reporting resources, maybe on campus, or areas where they can go learn more about the topics mentioned in the programs. All right, so you probably can't read this. We're happy to send this to you if you'd like. But this is what the document looked like that we gave our peer educators. It's complete with examples for them to reference. So you'll see each element that I just talked about, the purpose of that element, and then a hypothetical example that helped guide them through proposing different ways of learning the things that we talked about in the workshop in an online environment. So we also eventually added assessment to this template following the initial pilot phase of the initial GetWise programs. And from then on, it mostly looked like knowledge checks where we use a lot of RISE's survey and quiz functions. They also have other types of interactions that you can use as a knowledge check. So we wanted to make sure that we were kind of just giving students a little opportunity to be like, oh, did you read that? Do you understand that? Here's how you can apply that. And they're not like required or anything. It's not required to get it wasn't originally required to get like the right answer, but RISE has updated that quite a bit. So now you can toggle it so that folks have to get a right answer in order to move on, which has been really, really cool. So we now have like 6 elements of our course design. All right, so I'm going to walk you through what those 6 elements look like in practice using some examples from our current GetWise programs. Everything that you see here is from our programs. And since RISE is mostly text-based, we rely on text quite a bit to help convey the things that we want folks to learn. And to fulfill the learning objectives. So the upper left image is a moment where we explain that hookup culture fosters false expectations, that frequent casual sex and one-night stands are the norm. And then, why is this important? Beneath it, we say that it can make people feel like they have to keep up with or fit in with their peers. And to the right, you'll see an example of a summary block. Each module has a summary section to summarize each module's learning objectives and help students understand the why of why is this important. So the example that I have here states, it is important to understand root causes of violence on college campuses and how social norms can prevent us from recognizing violence when it is happening. So this means understanding how social norms around drinking, hooking up, and power dynamics influence our perceptions and act as barriers to identifying violent or harmful behaviors. One thing of note to mention here as well is that RISE does have a rich text editor. So that's shown in this middle image here. So you can use bolding, italics, underlines, bullet points. You can indent things. You can use subscript, superscript, things like that. So anything that you can use basically in like Microsoft Word or another rich text editor in like, I don't know, WordPress or something like that, you can use in Rise. And they've also greatly expanded this feature in the last year or two, which has been really, really cool. And from everything involving like text spacing and things like that, that's been really, really helpful for getting the look and feel that you want while also helping students' eyes get to the most important parts of that text. Again, since it is such a text-based program, we use this a lot to help students get the most important stuff. So their eyes aren't just glazing over plain text all the time. Next is our interaction activity. So we're using GIFs from here on out, or not here on out entirely, but for the next few slides here and there. So we use interactions and activities to immerse students in the material and help them learn the objectives as best as our skill set and the technology can allow. Rise has a number of options for interactions just built in. So this slide shows a few different flip card blocks. And that can help them learn the definitions of sexual and relationship violence. And later you'll see right here a timeline block to help them understand some context about those definitions. The timeline block isn't something that I use a lot, but it does help for spacing some of that information out and kind of highlighting those things. So we do love our flip cards and things like that. But there are a lot of other interactions that I'll show you here in the next few slides. There's also a basic accordion feature, which is common on features of web page authoring platforms like WordPress, among others. So in this example, we use the accordion block to show an example of what a bystander might see or hear as a warning sign of violence. So in this example, a sign that someone might be sexually taking advantage of someone due to their intoxication because they're drunk or high. If they click that, the accordion will open and a quote is in every single one of them that can help them understand or put this into context or apply to real life situations, what that might be like. So that might be hearing in this example, dude, yeah, Micah was plastered and everyone dared them to flash us, so they did. It was hilarious. Our next interaction activity is an interactive photo block that Rise has, and I love interactive photo blocks. We use them throughout our programs for a lot of different things. In this example, we have an aerial photo of our campus, UW-Madison, and we ask them to click 3 buttons that correlate to the top 3 locations with the highest rates of sexual assault on our campus, according to the 2019 AAU Campus Climate Survey that was done on our campus. And the answers there are on-campus housing, off-campus housing, and fraternity houses, and that one is specific to women. And so when they click each button, a text-based pop-up comes up that we put in risk factors and more context of why this is a top location in each of them to help them better understand that. But we are literally putting them directly in the campus environment, so to speak, on their screen and using this as a way to hopefully immerse them a little bit more into what this actually looks like on our campus. Another interactive photo block. This one is one of my favorites. We use this one in our bystander intervention curriculum to simulate a party environment, really put folks, even though this is an aerial image, in kind of inside a party environment, simulating that what they might hear, see, or feel that could indicate violence is happening or about to happen at that party. So it is an image of a party. It's a little blurry to indicate that there might be some intoxication happening. And there are like 5 or 6 buttons that students can click, and it will give them a little thing that they might hear, see, or feel as a bystander. And so this one says, you see someone who looks familiar from one of your classes, another person whom you don't recognize slides up behind them. The person you don't recognize puts their hands on your classmate's hips and starts dancing. Your classmate looks a little out of it, but isn't pushing them away. So they'll go through all of these, they'll see a little bit, all these kind of little mini vignettes, and then right below it, we can use embedded Qualtrics surveys. That is a survey authoring platform. And we can embed them pretty seamlessly into Rise, which is really cool. And we use this quite a bit as a way to do interactions, specifically reflections, which I'll talk about later. But we ask them, what warning signs of violence did you notice? And we give them that opportunity to think about what they just saw, type some stuff in here, and then when they hit continue underneath it, we'll tell them about those warning signs of violence. So I believe actually the accordions you just saw is what immediately follows this part. All right, so this one is also one of my favorites. We recently started using Storyline to create highly customized interactions. This is the consent toolbox activity that I spent quite a bit of time designing over the last or during the last year. So students can click on a toolbox graphic that our communications team developed for us. Really, really cute. And when students click on each of those tools in the toolbox, it leads them to more information about how to employ that consent skill. So in this example, the student clicks on the checklist tool, and it leads them to a list of things to check in about, in this case, safer sex practices. So in each case, we'll define, kind of what it is, why it's important to check in about that, and give them a lot of examples. So hopefully they walk away with not only things to think about when they're doing consent conversations, but also some tangible examples that they might use or use in their own words. So while we can never replace a peer-led dialogue as an educational experience, it is a huge value that we incorporate the student voice as often as possible to reinforce the learning objectives. And leveraging technology is essential to be able to do this. Rise can embed videos such as from YouTube or Vimeo, or even raw video files directly into the program. So we've used that in a variety of ways, such as to have them hear from our Title IX coordinator or hear from our advocacy team at our Survivor Services program or things like that. In this specific one, we wanted to use a video to kind of give that peer perspective. And so we filmed a series of 3 videos for our SexWise, Healthy Sexuality and Sexual Violence Prevention program last summer. And so in this one, it is some students at UW-Madison talking about the unspoken pressures and expectations of hookup culture in college. We also collect a lot of data about student attitudes, knowledge, and perception of social norms, and we really wanted to leverage this data to be able to speak directly back to students about their experiences. So this is a text photo block that says nearly 2/3 of incoming students feel clear on what they want sexually, but only half of students feel confident talking to a partner about what they want. So this drives home that why point. Why is it important to get more sexual communication and consent skills? And it comes directly from their peers' experiences. This data comes from the You Got This program, which is the prerequisite required program to get WISE for first year and new trans for undergrads. So if the person taking the program is a first year new trans for undergraduate, they just took the You Got This program, maybe a month ago, maybe a couple weeks ago. And so they would have responded to the pre-post survey where we got this information. So they can see it just a week or two later, using their entire peers' averages and scores there. So we've been wanting to incorporate that into the program for a long time, and this is a new addition to our SexWise program that we're really proud of. Also, we use social norms data as well to help illustrate for students that what they perceive as a social norm might not actually be aligned with what people actually believe. And a new and particularly powerful example in our SexWise program that I really, really love is in a section of SexWise that's about gendered sex roles. So it says, we're specifically talking about how men are socialized to always want sex. We think that men are just hypersexual, and maybe they don't need to be asked for consent. So we use this social norm data to kind of counteract that. And it says 86% of UW-Madison students strongly believe men need to be asked for consent, but only 38% of students think their peers believe the same. So this is hopefully a little bit of a light bulb moment that can correct that misperceived social norm. So a core principle of our workshops and online programs is that we really want to make this as real and applicable for individual students as possible. So we use embedded Qualtrics surveys, as I mentioned before, as a little self-reflection moment throughout all of our programs. So as you can see, this is a little GIF example of at the very beginning of our bystander intervention program, ActWise. And it asks them like 10 to 12 inventory questions about their experiences with intervening and their values around intervening and being part of the UW-Madison campus culture. And of course, we strongly emphasize campus and community resources, both confidential and reporting throughout our programs. So here on the left is a photo text block that highlights our Survivor Services program and all the services that they offer. And at the end of every module of each program, we include a list of external resources where students can learn more about the topics that we talk about. So you can see that on the right side of this slide, little buttons where they can learn more. And finally, the sixth element that we added after our pilot of the programs is assessment. So mostly these look like knowledge check blocks. So RISE has quiz blocks, and this example on the slide is actually a sorting block, and it asks students to correctly sort each campus and community resource into either confidential or reporting categories. We added this one in particular because we've noticed that students struggle to remember the names of all of the different resources that we inundate them with in their first couple weeks. And so we hope that this is a helpful, again, second dose of here's the information, but also let's test you a little bit on it to hopefully remember what is confidential, what is a reporting resource. You can see, yeah, the GIF going there. We also use Canvas-based surveys at the beginning and end of each program to measure the effectiveness of the program. So we can export that data and use it to understand student experiences of the program. And we use both quantitative and qualitative questions in order to do so. And it's a ton of rich data. We love all of our evaluation data. All right, so those were examples of all of the different kind of areas we like students to go through as they're going through our modules. So after the first year of doing this program, we learned a lot of lessons, and we've improved the programs ever since. One of the first things we learned was about pacing. So this is a scroll-based platform, right? So it's really easy for students to just speed through the program and not read anything. And that's kind of a default feature of RISE, unfortunately. So we use RISE continue buttons, like a ton of them, to kind of chunk up the program content. And this is so students are only able to read a sentence or two at a time. So again, just like making sure that their attention is focused on a minimal amount of information at a time to make it as easy as possible. Some students like this, some students don't like this. We definitely get mixed reviews, but we want to make sure that students aren't just flying through the programs. So even if they have to stop and click a continue button, or as in this example, click a little interactive thing to unlock that continue button, at least they're slowing down, and maybe their brain will absorb some of that information. Again, knowing this is a self-directed and scroll-based, very individual type of program. So that has been something we've incorporated quite a bit, and we use a lot of continue buttons with our interaction so that students have to complete that interaction before moving on to the next part of the program. We also learned a ton right away about accessibility. So when we first started using RISE, we didn't know much about online accessibility. And admittedly, we just assumed that if we were using a product on the market like Articulate, it must be compliant with regard to WCAG compliance and accessibility. So this was a huge mistake, absolutely incorrect, and a big moment of learning for us. So we ended up working with our IT department's digital accessibility team, which we're so fortunate to have here at UW-Madison. And they performed an accessibility audit of the program, used screen readers and a lot of other aids to be able to tell us whether it was accessible or not and what parts were not accessible to different types of needs, right? So it was super instrumental in learning more about how to make things accessible, but also what was in or outside of our control as a course designer to make the program as accessible as possible. So we paid attention to a lot of things like color contrast, the use of alt text, use of images, videos, text size, lots of things. One thing that has been really amazing that's happened in the last several years is RISE has made several accessibility updates since then, and it keeps a continually updating blog post about their accessibility updates, which we always are paying attention to in order to tweak our content on an ongoing basis. So sometimes they fix things that we knew were inaccessible and phased out of our program. And when they fix it and we know that it's compliant, we can phase that back in using the best practices that they offer. So you can see on the screen, RISE 360, our accessibility journey. That is their post that keeps a running list of all their accessibility updates that they've made over the years. So you can kind of check that out, see where they've been. And they're always also beta testing different features. So that's also been really exciting to see as well, particularly as far as accessibility goes. And finally, the last lesson that we learned during our first pilot phase was about relevance, specifically how we were making the program like speak to students' lived experiences and identities. So when we first started using Rise, we had some trouble finding photos from their embedded photo gallery that represented our student population, particularly our most at-risk and disproportionately impacted populations. And at the time, so many of the photos were of people who were like professionally aged, not college age, mostly white, very limited BIPOC representation. A lot of them were conventionally attractive and thin. And a lot of cis heteronormativity was represented in pictures that focused on relationships, which is not great for the type of work we are doing. And again, knowing who is disproportionately impacted by violence on in our campus, which tends to be some BIPOC communities, queer and trans students, and folks with disabilities. So we ended up using other photo galleries to supplement, such as our own UW-Madison photo gallery to bring that campus-based relevance in, and other free and for use galleries, namely Broadly's Gender Spectrum collection to highlight queer and trans experiences, identities, and bodies, and NAPI, which is a photo gallery of Black and Brown folks. These are all free, so highly recommend checking them out for whatever it is that you're doing. And Rise has also thankfully improved their photo gallery a few times since then, adding a ton more diversity, a ton more usable photos. And so most of our images now do come from Rise because of those enormous edits, which we're very thankful for. And now I'll turn things over to Nola to talk more about how to apply your values in designing these online-based programs.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so we're going to dive into our final section of program design content. I want to start with another Slido. This might be a crunchy one. To what extent do you feel your existing violence prevention programs reflect your values and your sense of prevention best practices? So we've got a little, somewhat, a lot, or not sure. Okay, looks like we got about 2/3 somewhat and 1/3 a lot. Thank you all for sharing. We're going to focus on 3 buckets of values that we wanted to incorporate as much as possible into our online programs. So the first is transformative. We wanted programs that weren't just awareness raising, but were addressing root causes, including oppression. We wanted aspirationally for our programs to be inclusive, so as trauma-informed, accessible, and intersectional as possible. And we really wanted them to be relevant to student experiences. So we wanted to be student focused, we wanted to be affirming in our tone and content, and we wanted to support concrete skill building among students. So what does that mean in practice? In terms of transformative programming, we wanted our programs to explicitly talk about risk and protective factors and share that language with students. We wanted to really target social norms. Alex has talked a little bit about how we've used data to do that. We wanted to address power dynamics as a key risk factor for violence. And we really wanted to empower students to see opportunities for culture change around them. So a few examples of this risk and protective factor slides. This is one thing that has changed a little bit. Some of this content has been altered or taken out based on feedback and concerns we've had from leadership in the context of our campus climate. But this is one part of a program where we're still talking explicitly about those like systemic risk factors for sexual and relationship violence. This is from our survivor support program. So it's one of those interactive pictures Alex talked about where you can select different root causes and read a little bit about them. And the highlighted one in this example is gender roles. This is an example of how we talk about social norms. We've really increasingly focused on norms around hookup culture, their intersections with high-risk drinking culture and power dynamics, and what that looks like on our campus at a PWI with a really high-risk drinking culture, even compared to similar other Big Ten institutions. So this is a triple Venn diagram that Alex created that I love. So it's 3 intersecting circles with high-risk drinking culture, power dynamics, and hookup culture. You can select each of those to see characteristics for each of those like risk factors for sexual violence, as well as select the like overlaps of each circle and at the center to see how those 3 factors like intersect to create risk around sexual violence. there are a lot of different ways we talk about power dynamics in the program. So I mentioned gender norms, and Alex talked about that too in their section. There's a screenshot here of how sex role stereotypes shape how we think about sexual pleasure, namely whose sexual pleasure matters. In our bystander intervention program, we call out 3 different forms of power that we focus on in the program: social power, positional power, and situational power. And you can go through a process to see how each of those relates to risk for perpetrating and experiencing violence. And then one piece of that interactive map with the highest risk locations for sexual assault on campus that Alex mentioned calls out off-campus housing. So we've got a little text box here saying older students are more likely to live off campus and control social space, which can make younger students more vulnerable in these locations. And then our programs each end with a visual social ecological model and headers that say things like creating consent culture and preventing sexual violence will take shifts at many different levels, from everyday actions to systemic realities. You can then select each level of the social ecology to see different prevention practices that are relevant to that level. So one example from the interpersonal level is supporting others' authentic sexual decisions. In terms of aspirationally inclusive programs, we wanted to provide options. So you've heard about that. We wanted to be intentional with our content advisories. We wanted an improved exemption process. We wanted to, as much as possible, utilize plain language and share glossaries and definitions, especially where students might be less familiar with language. Alex talked a little bit about really wanting to have diverse representation of student identities. This is one place we have been challenged and forced to change our content a bit over the last year or so. And then they also spoke to the importance of resources. We are still able to include a range of resources, but some we have had to take out. And we now have additional disclaimers that our institution is not endorsing these resources, even sometimes when they're really basic survivor support resources like national hotlines. So this is just a visual of different graphics that our communications team created for each of our programs. So every program reminds students that they have other options if they need to switch to a different program option. And now that we are encouraging upper class students to participate in these programs as well, we're recommending that people take a different program every year. So we have just different visuals for each option. Example of our content advisories, we have red call out boxes sharing when we think there's likely to be more activating content like descriptions of sexual or racial violence in this example. And we continually remind students they have options and link to a form that they can fill out to request an exemption. We've seen a big increase in accessing exemptions since we put that form into effect. This is a screenshot of our exemption form, which also allows students to opt into hearing from a survivor services advocate if they would like to connect to support resources. This is an example of our glossary we found, especially with our healthy sexuality curriculum. There might be a lot of terms related to gender and sexual identities, sexual behaviors, things like kink, that people might be less familiar with. So we begin with a glossary. Alex talked a bit about representation with pictures. So we have a few examples here. One thing that I did when writing scenarios was to use a meme generator to kind of check some of my own biases or assumptions about who might be experiencing harm or perpetrating harm in different gender dynamics and different racialized dynamics. So we aim for, it's less diverse than it used to be, but a range of dynamics in terms of who's experiencing the harm, where it's coming from, and queer and trans representation too. Just another screenshot of our additional resources on trauma. Fun fact, one of these books I learned about from a puzzle session many years ago, so I'm glad I got to include it here. Okay, and in terms of relevance, so concretely, we wanted that to look like a humanizing tone. When I was writing content originally for these programs, I thought about it as if I were talking directly to young adults who I respected and trusted their lived expertise and cared about. We've had some pushback about whether or how that's maybe moralizing. I was using a lot of language like there's nothing wrong with this and it's okay if you feel that, and all of these different experiences and perceptions are valid. We got the feedback from leadership that that was maybe telling students too much, what wasn't or wasn't okay, and people might feel differently about that. So I think our programs are still humanizing, but that was some feedback I didn't necessarily expect in terms of our writing approach. Alex spoke a lot to reflection opportunities. We really try to call out concrete tools for prevention and intervention. We have a range of scenarios, although many of those have been removed or changed, either related to identity dynamics or because of concerns about length. They spoke to knowledge checks and peer voice. And we've also talked a little bit about this iterative revision cycle. So originally we were doing focus groups, especially with student orgs with content expertise, our anti-violence student org, our like healthy sex student org. We have lost a lot of control more recently related to our revision process. And so changes have really reflected leadership and PR concerns and not necessarily like our data or our student feedback. So that's something we're still figuring out. In terms of humanizing tone, one example, when we had students going through these programs to kind of test and give them feedback, they told us that in addition to having survivor support content, we really needed accountability content, how to talk to a friend who had caused harm. And even beyond that, we needed to think about what if an 18-year-old is going through this program and for the first time they realize they've been the person causing harm. So we include a section on how to kind of navigate that in a way that we hope is compassionate and also kind of calls people into a behavior change process and not causing further harm in their response to that realization. Another example of a reflection opportunity, we have here a slider activity asking about students' experiences with sex ed before college, where they can rate on a 0 to 10 scale in response to questions like, do you feel the information you got about sex was adequate? One example of a concrete tool in our healthy conflict section in our Dating Wise curriculum, we talk about self-regulation skills and also give some examples of what that can look like. Within our scenarios, Alex spoke to this too. We provide a range of options for interactivity. So for example, we talk about what best practices for bystander intervention are. We have students review a scenario and then select. We'll first speak to what warning signs they saw, what intervention tool they might use, and what best practices might be most relevant to that scenario. So in this situation, we say, then here's our perspective. We'd recommend checking your biases about who can experience and perpetrate violence. And you could also center the person who's being targeted in this way. This is another call out of our peer perspectives. So there's audio content from our former peer educators and student staff in this program with then like a call out quote. So we really love this one about being casual with someone doesn't mean you don't have to care about or respect their needs and feelings. And one example of a knowledge check, the following statements about social norms are true, except the 3 options. One piece of feedback we got early on, especially from like our healthy sex and sex ed student org on campus, is that we didn't have enough safer sex content. So they were telling us we needed barrier demos and information about lube and where to access every kind of birth control. And at first we were like, we didn't necessarily think that's the curriculum we were writing, but of course, sex ed in terms of like that basic information is such a key protective factor. And we've talked more recently about how to incorporate more of that into our prevention programming. So we didn't do everything they asked for, but we did expand our healthy sex curriculum to include kind of a 101 and links to resources about things like STI testing, options for safer sex and pleasure, birth control, and figuring out safer sex strategies that fit you and your partner's needs. No rush, Sam. So we wanted to give you an example of some of the feedback we get from students. We get a lot of qualitative feedback. We cannot go through all of it. We don't currently have a comprehensive, consistent strategy for sampling and analyzing all of it. But we do get to go through and find gems. So I wanted to share a few that are relevant to some of the values that we've been speaking to. One person said, very honest, makes you feel less alone, which spoke to the humanizing piece for me. We had someone say something they liked was getting to know myself and knowing how to become more prepared. And I appreciated that self-reflection piece. One said, I liked the amount of detail it went into about how harmful society has been. I think this is a section about sexual health that is often overlooked or played down, which for me was like, yes, we addressed the kind of root cause of sharing explicitly about a sex negative culture and the risks with that. And it taught me how to deal with complicated situations with my friends better, which to me spoke to kind of concrete tools and being able to actually apply these skills to relationships. I'm going to pass back to Sam now to wrap us up.
Okay, so we gave you a lot about infrastructure to consider, tech considerations to consider, how to make your programs value aligned. So we're going to ask you the same question again. Now, how confident do you feel in your ability to develop an online course? If you're still with us, okay. We got a little smiley face going on, somewhat confident. We hope we can convey through this that if we could figure out how to do this, you can figure out how to do this. You have a lot of the capabilities and skills in you already, and it's more about seeking and knowing what support is available to you. So in conclusion, to answer this big to buy or to build question, we can't answer it for you. But we do encourage you to consider your institutional context, capacity, and infrastructure. How many of those big questions were you able to answer at the beginning? You want to be able to leverage technology and process for pedagogical impact, and then take advantage of the opportunities that exist with going custom for relationality and values alignment. So with that, we want to thank you very much for listening. We know this can be a very niche tech-specific topic. As I mentioned, we are so down to do individual consultations too, show you more of the online interactivity features. Our contact information, I'm sure, is available through HUVA and the platform, but also our general contact is violenceprevention@uhs.wisc.edu. I'm going to try to check if we had any questions.
It doesn't look like we have questions, or at least I don't see any in the Q&A. But if folks do have questions, please feel free to ask.
Just any thoughts or reactions are welcome too.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, I am seeing a question in the Q&A. So it says, you definitely mentioned this, but can you elaborate on what happens if a student doesn't complete the program? I can definitely answer that. So if a student doesn't complete the program by the course deadline, which is usually about a month to a month and a half after the program has opened, we place a hold on their enrollment. So that prevents them enrolling for the next semester of courses. So then since I'm the one doing this, I just pick up on all the reminder email speed, and we are talking to them as often as possible. We really don't want to impede their enrollment. So if a student has any issues with the program, a tech issue, they feel emotionally uncomfortable with the program, or like it would harm their well-being, there are options for that. If a student requests an exemption, their hold is immediately removed. Or if they're having a tech issue, usually we can remove the hold and support them with it, encouraging them to review the program program content to make sure that they're not missing out on any learning. So yeah, we usually place somewhere around, we usually have about like 10,000 students for our first years, and usually about 900 to 1,000, sometimes more, depending on the program, receiving a hold. I think we placed like 2 or 3,000, I think, for GetWise. But that's a newer requirement for placing the holds. We usually gave them an entire extra semester to complete it, but this year we aligned it with our other program. So, but folks are able to complete it, and then we have a really cool integration with our enrollment management office, where once a student completes the program, their hold will automatically lift within about 2 hours, sometimes less. Well, thank you for that question.
Other questions? Otherwise, yeah, Maddie, I see you in the chat that you're in the middle of renegotiation. So yes, please feel free to use any of the materials today as part of that process. I should mention too, we're also happy to share demos of the GetWise programs upon request. Like if you're just looking for inspiration or what's possible, it's something we've done for campus colleagues too.
I know I'm personally interested in the demos. Should we, if we're interested in something like that, should we like Hoover DM one of you with our like emails, or what's the best way to
Yeah.
connect and get that?
Yeah, I would say so. If you could send us an email at our general account, it's violenceprevention@uhs.wis.edu. Just mention that you saw us at Puzzles, and yeah, we'll get you the links to those.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other final questions? Awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm trying to remember.